I'm Kaitlyn Reed, 34 years old, and let me tell you, I never imagined I'd be the sort of person who'd orchestrate the complete and utter decimation of my family's comfortable delusions. But here we are. Life's funny like that, isn't it? Not haha funny, more staring into the abyss whilst the abyss judges your life choices. Funny. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Because nothing says family bonding quite like crowdsourcing your global audience whilst your relatives plot your demise over the turkey. 6 months ago, at our family's Thanksgiving dinner, because of course it was Thanksgiving, the universe does love its irony, my sister slapped me across the face. Proper, dramatic soap opera style. Her voice was positively dripping with venom, the sort you'd expect from a villain in a particularly overwrought period drama. "You've got 10 minutes to get out of my house," she hissed. My parents, oh, they absolutely loved it. Clapping like trained seals at SeaWorld, laughing as though my humiliation was the evening's entertainment. Marvelous family, really. Truly heartwarming stuff. My cheeks stung. Funny how physical pain clarifies things, isn't it? But I smiled. Because I'm British at heart, even if I'm stuck in California's Central Valley. And we smile when we're absolutely furious. I pulled a file from my bag, slammed it on the table with a satisfying thud that echoed through their smug little bubble, and said, "Then you all have 5 minutes." The room froze. Absolutely spectacular. Their smug faces crumbling like a poorly constructed sandcastle was chef's kiss perfection. Years of being the family's doormat, the reliable one, the bloody fool who paid for repairs and swallowed their lies like bitter medicine. It all snapped inside me. That glorious, liberating snap. That file held the deed to our Spanish ranch, a secret buried for nearly a decade like a particularly explosive landmine. I wasn't just fighting for a house, you understand. I was reclaiming my life, my sanity, and my ability to look in the mirror without cringing. But how did I end up with that deed? Staring down my own blood in a dining room thick with betrayal and rapidly cooling turkey. If you were in that situation, what would you do? Leave a comment below. I'm quite happy now and want to spread the story further, mostly because schadenfreude is underrated and therapy's expensive. The beginning, or how I became the family ATM. Back when I was 25, young, stupid, and full of dreams that hadn't yet been systematically crushed, the pattern of being used started. I just graduated from UC Fresno with my degree in interior design. Head full of dreams about restoring historic homes in the Central Valley. You know, proper romanticism about old buildings before reality shows you that historic homes are mostly just expensive nightmares with charming facades. The Spanish ranch my family called home, built in the 1950s by my grandparents, felt like the perfect base. It sat on a plot with an old almond grove that my grandmother Beatrice Klein had tended for decades. Her hands rough from years of pruning branches under the relentless valley sun. The kind of hands that told stories, you know? Unlike my sister's manicured talons that told stories of expensive salons and other people's money. Beatrice was the one who saw me, the quiet kid who sketched room layouts whilst my sister Cassidy chased the spotlight like a moth with delusions of grandeur. That summer, Beatrice's health was fading fast, worn down by the valley's dry heat and the general exhaustion of living. I moved back to help, because I'm apparently a glutton for punishment. Whilst Mom and Dad jetted off to cheer my sister at her marketing conferences in Los Angeles, because of course they did, I was the one driving Beatrice to her doctor's appointments in Fresno, listening to her stories about the ranch's roots. These visits weren't glamorous. They were beige waiting rooms and the smell of antiseptic and watching someone you love slowly disappear. "These almond trees remember everything, Kaitlyn," she'd say, guiding my hands through the soil, her voice weak but steady. "Nurture them and they'll outlast us all." I treasured those moments, even whilst I was learning how to irrigate the grove amid rising water taxes that were choking small farms like ours. Nothing says California dreaming quite like watching bureaucracy slowly strangle agriculture, does it? Cassidy, 3 years older and always the golden child, because someone has to be apparently, breezed in for visits loaded with excuses. She was launching her first fashion boutique in Sacramento, you see. Very important work. Much more important than, say, helping care for our dying grandmother. One afternoon, as we sat in the kitchen with Beatrice napping nearby, she hit me up. "Kaitlyn, I need a loan. Just $2,000 to cover startup costs. The shop's going to explode. Trust me." Her eyes sparkled with that confidence Mum adored, that sort of delusional self-assurance that tricks people into handing over money. I hesitated, my fresh diploma still crisp in my mind, but said yes. Because I'm an idiot. I wired the money from my meager savings. Mum absolutely beamed when Cassidy bragged about it later. "Your sister's going places," she gushed, as if my designs for local farmhouses were just adorable little hobbies. You know, the sort of thing you do whilst waiting for a real career. That was the first entry in what became my secret spreadsheet. My beautiful, meticulously maintained spreadsheet of betrayal. I opened Excel on my laptop that night, logging the loan with a note. "Unpaid, emotional pressure from Mum." It felt silly at first, rather like keeping a diary of disappointments. But as the months dragged on like a particularly tedious opera, Cassidy's calls kept coming. "Another 1,000 for inventory?" asked. She'd laugh it off with that carefree giggle that makes you want to commit violence. "You're the reliable one, sis." Yes, reliable. That delightful euphemism for sucker. Meanwhile, the ranch needed work. The roof leaked during rare rains, because even the weather's unreliable in California, and the almond irrigation system was failing under the water board's skyrocketing fees. I paid £300, sorry dollars, a month extra for my entry-level job, patching things myself because Dad shrugged and said, "It's old. What can you do?" Quite a lot, actually, if one bothers to try. But that would require effort. Diane, that's Mum, would fuss over Cassidy's boutique photos on her phone, ignoring my sketches for a Fresno Museum restoration gig. "Cassidy's so bold," she'd gush whilst Dad nodded, reminiscing about her college parties like they were the second coming. Why always her? I wondered, entering another $5,000 for roof repairs into the sheet, the cursor blinking like an accusation, like a tiny digital therapist asking, "Are you seeing this pattern, Kaitlyn?" Beatrice noticed my late nights at the kitchen table. "Keep those records close, child," she whispered one evening, her fingers tracing an almond shell with the reverence of someone who understands that small things matter. Roots without proof wither in the drought. Little did I know that spreadsheet was planting seeds for a reckoning far bigger than unpaid loans. Funny how Excel can be a weapon when properly deployed. 7 years passed. 7 years. That's 84 months of being the family's emotional support ATM if you're counting. Which I was. Obsessively. By 2023, I was 32 knee-deep in a freelance gig redesigning a historic barn just outside Fresno for a local museum. The Central Valley sun beat down mercilessly, because of course it did, turning the air hazy as I hauled boxes from the ranch's garage to clear space for my sketches and fabric swatches. The Spanish-style home with its terracotta tiles and arched doorways had always been my anchor, my safe place in a family that felt increasingly like a badly written sitcom where I was the punchline. But lately, the almond grove out back looked thirstier than ever, the trees' leaves curling under the weight of another water tax hike from the state board. California, where even the trees pay taxes. I wiped sweat from my brow, shoving aside a stack of old irrigation manuals Beatrice had hoarded, bless her organized little heart, when a yellowed envelope tumbled out, stamped in her neat script, "Beatrice Klein Estate." My hands shook as I tore it open, right there on the concrete floor, dust motes dancing in the slanted light like tiny witnesses to my impending life change. Inside was the property deed to the ranch, dated 2016, a full year before Beatrice passed. It named me Kaitlyn Reed, as the sole owner, with a notarized transfer from her to me, stipulating that Mum and Dad could stay as tenants at will. No strings attached. Rather generous of her, really, considering. Tucked beside it was a letter from her longtime solicitor. Sorry attorney, Victor Lang. His signature crisp as ever. American lawyers do love their theatrical flourishes. "Kaitlyn," it read, "this land is your roots now. Preserve the almond grove. Don't let developers from Silicon Valley turn it into another tech parking lot. I know you'll honor what it means. Generations of our blood in the soil." I sat there, back against a rusted toolbox, rereading it 3 times. The garage's musty scent mixing with the faint sweetness of spilled almond hulls from years ago created this odd, poignant atmosphere. Very cinematic. The universe was finally giving me decent production values. Why me? Beatrice had always said I had the eye for what lasted, sketching layouts that breathed life into old structures whilst Cassidy chased trends that fizzled faster than cheap champagne. But this meant our ranch, had been mine for 7 years. 7 bloody years. And no one breathed a word. Mum and Dad acting like it was theirs. Cassidy dropping hints about flipping the old place during her rare visits like she was on some property program. My stomach twisted with a delicious rage. They'd let me pour my savings into fixes, all whilst planning their exit strategy. How very entrepreneurial of them. That night, after locking the envelope in my desk drawer like the precious evidence it was, I fired up my laptop and dove into California property law sites. The screens glow harsh in the dim kitchen. Adverse possession. Statute of limitations for contesting a deed transfer. 4 years in California. Long expired since 2020. I drafted an email to Victor Lang, the name Beatrice had mentioned in passing during her final days, attaching a scan of the deed. His reply came swift the next morning, bless him. Confirmed legitimate, Kaitlyn. Diane and Gregory are tenants only. No ownership claim holds. Advise discretion until you're ready. Discretion felt like swallowing glass, but I tested the waters a week later. Over dinner, as the almond grove rustled outside from a rare evening breeze. Lovely ambience for deception, really. I mentioned the latest water bill. $4,000 this quarter for the grove irrigation. The ranch can handle it, right? Mum paused mid-bite, her fork hovering like a conductor's baton. Of course. It's our house after all, she said smoothly. Dad nodded along without looking up from his plate, because eye contact might require actual engagement. I had my phone recording in my pocket, the app's red light invisible. Modern technology. Making evidence collection so much easier than in Agatha Christie's day. Their words hung there, casual as the valley fog rolling in, sealing their fate with remarkable efficiency. Cassidy rang the following day. Her voice bright but edged with that distinctive note of desperation I'd come to recognize. Sis, the shop's tanking post-divorce. Can you spot me 10,000? Tyler's dragging his feet on alimony. For the first time in our entire relationship, I said no. Revolutionary, really. My thumb hovered over the end call button like I was defusing a bomb. Sorry, Cass. I'm tapped out from ranch stuff. She huffed indignantly. Fine. Be that way. And hung up. I added it to the spreadsheet. Refused loan, first boundary. Felt rather good, actually. Therapeutic, even. Their lie about the house burned hotter than the summer asphalt. That particular California asphalt that melts your shoes if you stand still too long. They'd hidden this to keep me footing the bills, waiting for the right developer offer to cash out. I wasn't just hurt. I was done playing the family martyr. The deed wasn't paper. It was ammunition. Beautiful, legally binding ammunition. From that dusty garage find, the plan took shape with the precision of a military operation. Over the next 2 years, from late 2023 into 2025, I turned that discovery into a blueprint for confrontation, all whilst keeping my freelance design work steady. I pitched concepts for Fresno's fading co-ops, sketching layouts that blended old adobe walls with modern drip lines for almond farms fighting the drought. The valley's water crisis was worsening. Shocking, I know. With Silicon Valley developers circling like particularly well-funded vultures, snapping up ranches for employee housing tied to new data centers. Because what California really needs is more tech campuses and fewer farms. Brilliant planning. I saw opportunity in their greed, though. During a casual phone call with Cassidy that autumn, as she rambled about her boutique's latest pivot after the divorce fallout, because pivoting is what you do when you're failing, I dropped the bait. Heard those tech giants are paying top dollar for valley land. Our almond grove could fetch a fortune, couldn't it? With water taxes killing small plots. I pause. I could practically hear the pound signs, sorry $signs, cha-chinging in her brain. Then she laughed sharply. You know, that's not a bad idea. Tyler's been saying we need cash flow for the shop. Yes. Tyler Vance, her new husband and self-proclaimed business consultant who'd swept in 6 months post-divorce. Nothing says sound judgment, quite like marrying a consultant during a financial crisis. He latched on fast, this Tyler character. I caught snippets during their holiday visits. Him pacing the ranch patio with his phone glued to his ear, muttering about quick flips to cover bridge loans like he was some sort of discount Gordon Gekko. Cassidy started probing Mom and Dad about the property taxes. Her tone casual but probing. Very subtle. Like a sledgehammer wrapped in silk. The ranch is just sitting there. Why not cash in? Dad grumbled about the upkeep. His favorite pastime. Mom nodded along, both avoiding my eyes when I was in the room like I was furniture. I let it simmer, adding their side conversations to my phone's voice memos app, time-stamped and tagged. Organization is key in any good revenge plot. By early 2024, I reached out to Brooke Ellis, an old college roommate from UC Fresno who'd gone into real estate law after burning out on corporate gigs. We'd bonded over late-night study sessions sketching mock floor plans, back when we thought the world made sense. When I rang her for coffee in downtown Fresno, spilling the deed details over lattes, because all good conspiracies require caffeine, her eyes widened. This is ironclad, Kate. I'll prep a video link for the confrontation. We can stream the confirmation live if it hits the fan. We scripted it out on napkins like proper plotters. If Cassidy pushed the sale, I'd counter with, "Did you run it by me? It's Mom and Dad's place, right?" Baiting the slap or outburst. Then pull the file, hit record on the phone, and switch to Brooke's feed for the legal smackdown. "Keep it calm," she advised, stirring her oat milk latte with the wisdom of someone who'd seen too many courtrooms. "Let them dig their own hole." Sound advice, really. Why do the work when your enemies will gladly do it for you? I ramped up the evidence collection too, snapping photos of every invoice as the ranch groaned under the heat. A cracked irrigation pipe from the summer swell cost $2,000 in parts. I fixed it myself, because of course I did, logging the total repairs at $35,000 since Beatrice's passing. Mostly water system overhauls to keep the almonds alive amid the board's fees. The trees were worth saving, even if the family wasn't. Cassidy hit me up again that spring, voice tight with that special desperation that comes from poor life choices catching up with you. 5,000 more, Kaitlyn. The boutique's inventory is stuck in customs. Tyler swears it's the last time. Tyler swears. How reassuring. Because Tyler's track record was so stellar. Mom had already texted me a guilt trip. Her speciality, really, she could win Olympic gold in maternal manipulation. "Your sister's trying so hard." I wired nothing, replying coolly, "Can't swing it, Cass. Ranch bills are piling up." Her silence on the line said everything. I captured the exchange, filing it under escalation. Each entry felt like loading a chamber in a very expensive, very legal gun. The almond trees out back stood resilient, their branches heavy with unharvested nuts, a quiet reminder of what was worth fighting for. Mum gushed to Dad about Cassidy's resilience during one visit, oblivious to the storm brewing. Remarkable, really, how people can be so blind to approaching catastrophe. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was directing. And Thanksgiving loomed on the horizon like a deadline from God. Thanksgiving arrived with all the warmth and cheer you'd expect from a family on the brink of implosion. I spent the morning in the ranch's kitchen, kneading almond-studded stuffing and roasting a turkey that filled the air with a warmth that felt like a complete and utter lie. The Spanish-style dining room with its heavy oak table and faded stucco walls was dressed for the holiday, but my pulse thrummed with anticipation. My phone, tucked in my apron pocket, was set to record. The deed file nestled in my bag by my chair like a small nuclear device. Very festive. Cassidy and her husband Tyler Vance rolled in late. Punctuality never was her strong suit, with Logan and Riley, their children, both clutching new tablets that absolutely screamed overcompensation. Nothing says, We're definitely not having financial problems. Quite like unnecessary electronics for children. Mom and Dad fawned over them, naturally, ignoring the hand-stitched placemats I'd made for the table, a nod to Beatrice's love for the land. Hours of work, completely invisible. Standard. As we sat, I played my first card, voice light and casual. This ranch is prime real estate now, isn't it? Silicon Valley's buying up valley plots for tech campuses, right? Cassidy's eyes flicked to Tyler, who smirked whilst adjusting his cufflinks. Cufflinks? Thanksgiving. The man was a walking red flag. Exactly, she said, leaning forward with the confidence of someone about to make a spectacular mistake. Which is why we're selling. Mom and Dad are on board. It's time to cash in for their retirement. My heart thudded, but I kept my face neutral, setting the trap with the precision of a bear trap covered in leaves. You ran this by me, Cass. Isn't it Mom and Dad's place? Her smile twisted into something ugly, a sneer that revealed exactly who she'd become. Why would we? You're just the helper, Kaitlyn. Just the helper. Poetry, really. Before I could respond, her hand cracked across my cheek, sharp and deliberate. Quite the flourish. 10 minutes to pack your stuff and get out of my house, she snapped. Mom clapped. Actually clapped, laughing softly like she was at the theater. About time, Cassidy. Dad joined in, his chuckle grating like sandpaper on an open wound. Lovely family dynamics. Really warms the heart. I smiled, slow, deliberate, my cheek still stinging with that delicious physical evidence. I see, I said, reaching for my bag with theatrical precision because two could play at drama. The room went still as I pulled out the manila file and slammed it on the table. The thud echoed like a gavel in a courtroom. Magnificent acoustics, really. Then you all have 5 minutes. This ranch is mine. Cassidy's fork clattered. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Logan's eyes widened. Riley clutched her tablet tighter. Tyler sputtered. What is this? The universal cry of someone whose scam has been discovered. I tapped my phone, starting the recording because documentation is everything, and dialed Brooke Ellis on video call. Her calm, professional face appeared on the screen like an avenging angel in business casual. Brooke, confirm the transfer for me. Her voice rang clear, beautiful in its certainty. Kaitlyn Reed owns the ranch outright. Deeded in 2016 by Beatrice Klein. Notarized and uncontestable under California law since 2020. I've got copies, and you're being recorded. The silence was exquisite. I swiped to play the 2023 audio clip from my test with Mum. Her voice echoed through the dining room. Of course, it's our house after all. The look on her face. Priceless. Absolutely priceless. Cassidy lunged for the file, shouting, This is fake. You're scamming us. Because when caught, always double down on the lies. It's the family way. Tyler's face turned an impressive shade of red. We'll sue. I leaned back, utterly unshaken, enjoying this far more than was probably healthy. You took a $20,000 deposit on property you don't own, Tyler. That's fraud. Good luck with that legal battle. Logan started crying. Aunt Kaitlyn, why are you fighting? Sweet child. If only you knew. Riley tugged at Cassidy's sleeve, completely ignored. Priorities, you see. Cassidy's glare could have burned the table to ash. She grabbed Tyler's arm, pulling him and the children toward the door with the desperation of someone whose world had just collapsed. This isn't over, she hissed, slamming the door so hard the chandelier rattled. The turkey sat untouched, steam fading in the silence. Rather metaphorical, really. All that effort for nothing. Mom and Dad stared at their plates, their laughter gone like smoke. I pocketed my phone, the recording still running, always keep recording, and thought, well, that went rather well. The table was cleared, but the real battle, that was just beginning. I turned to Mom and Dad, the turkey carcass mocking us from the platter like some sort of poultry Greek chorus, and slid my phone across the oak surface. Play this, I said quietly, hitting the button on the 2023 clip. Mum's voice filled the room, tiny but unmistakable. Of course, it's our house after all. The audio cut off, leaving only the hum of the fridge in the kitchen beyond. That mechanical hum seemed louder in the silence, like the soundtrack to their dawning realization. Dad's fork froze midway to his mouth, his knuckles white with tension. Mum's eyes darted to the door where Cassidy had stormed out minutes ago, the children's cries still echoing faintly. Delayed reaction that takes a moment for betrayal to fully process. When did you know, Mum? I pressed, my tone even, like we were discussing the weather rather than a decade of deception. From 2016. Victor Lang rang right after Beatrice's funeral, didn't he? She flinched, her napkin twisting in her lap like a distressed origami project. Kaitlyn, please. Dad slammed his hand down. The glasses rattled, quite dramatic. This is family business. Secrets keep us together. His face flushed, veins bulging at his temples like a blood pressure warning. Very healthy response. I didn't flinch. Years of practice, you see. Secrets like letting me believe the ranch was yours so I'd keep pouring money into it. I flipped open my laptop. Always come prepared with visual aids, the screen casting a cold glow on the stucco walls. I pulled up the spreadsheet. My beautiful damning spreadsheet. Rows upon rows scrolled by. Dates, amounts, notes. A catalog of betrayal, meticulously maintained. $35,000 in repairs since Beatrice died. That's me wiring funds for the irrigation lines when water taxes spiked to $400 a month. $15,000 in loans to Cassidy that vanished into her shop like water in the desert. Mum's breath hitched, tears welling. The waterworks right on schedule. We didn't ask for that. No, I countered, my voice sharp as a scalpel. You just complained until I stepped in. Every leak, every cracked pipe from the valley heat. I fixed it thinking it was your home. Silly me. Dad leaned forward, voice dropping to that low, threatening tone he probably thought was intimidating. You're twisting this. Cassidy's divorce left her drowning. $50,000 in debt from Tyler's bad deals. She needed the ranch sale more than anyone. Yes, need. The universal justification for terrible behavior. I nodded as if agreeing. Always let them think they're making points, then cued the next file. Cassidy's voice crackled through the speaker from a memo I'd caught during their last visit. The deposit's wired. $20,000 from the developer. Tyler says it's clean. But if Mom and Dad sign quick. Tyler's laugh followed, muffled but clear. Silicon Valley won't notice a little padding for my consulting fee. The recording ended on Cassidy's giggle. That same carefree giggle. Now evidence of fraud. Funny how context changes everything. Mum buried her face in her hands, sobs breaking free like a dam finally cracking. She was desperate, Kaitlyn. After the split, the alimony fights. We thought the money would fix it. Money fixes everything. The family motto, apparently. Dad reached for her, but his eyes stayed on me, hard and accusing. You're destroying us over some old paper. Some old paper. I echoed, voice steady despite the knot in my throat. You hid Beatrice's will for 9 years. Let me shoulder the load whilst plotting to sell her almond grove to tech suits. You needed it enough to steal her legacy. To steal my legacy. The room spun with their silence, broken only by Mum's whimpers. Rather pathetic, really. Closed the laptop. The click was final, decisive. Very satisfying. Eviction notice goes out tomorrow morning. California law gives 3 days. Then your tenants no more. Dad's jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. Evicting your own parents. Mum whispered, voice small. We can talk this out. But I stood, gathering the dishes with the calm of someone who'd finally found peace. The weight shifted from my chest for the first time in years. Their tears fell and I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. The fallout, as they say, was just starting. 6 months later, the papers were signed, sealed, and delivered with the efficiency of the American legal system when property rights are clear as crystal. By March 2026, The Fresno County Superior Court had rubber-stamped the eviction after a grueling 45 days from the 3-day notice, the judge citing clear title under California Civil Code. I stood in the ranch driveway, keys in hand, watching the locksmith change the locks whilst the almond grove bloomed defiantly against the valley's early spring chill. Rather poetic timing, that. New beginnings and all. Mom and Dad loaded their battered SUV with boxes, faces gaunt from the legal notices piling up like unpaid bills. No hugs, no goodbyes. Just Diane's muffled sobs from the passenger seat as Gregory gunned the engine toward a medical nursing home in Clovis. Monthly fees of $2,800 for the bare-bones room they qualified for after draining their savings on solicitor fees. Expensive lawyers. Poor results. Tale as old as time. Cassidy's world unraveled faster than a cheap jumper. I filed the fraud report on Tyler 2 days after Thanksgiving. No rest for the wicked, as they say, citing the $20,000 developer deposit as mail fraud under federal statute. His consulting fee padding exposed through bank statements I'd subpoenaed via Brooke, who was having far too much fun with this whole thing. The IRS pounced first because they always do, auditing his side hustles for tax evasion tied to the divorce debts, uncovering $50,000 in unreported income from shady property flips. Tyler, it turned out, was as good at business as he was at marriage, which is to say, spectacularly terrible. By January, Chapter 7 bankruptcy swallowed the boutique whole. The judge discharged the debts but liquidated assets, forcing a fire sale of their Fresno suburb split level. Cassidy texted me in a frenzy. "This is your fault. We're homeless." I blocked the number without reply. Her pleas for family help, echoing the loans she'd never repaid, had a certain ironic poetry. The universe does enjoy its callbacks. The divorce hit like a valley dust storm. Sudden, violent, and absolutely devastating. Tyler's schemes, funneling alimony through offshore accounts, blew up spectacularly in family court. The judge awarded Cassidy primary custody of Logan and Riley, but stripped her of spousal support amid the fraud fallout. She fought tooth and nail, but with no steady income post-bankruptcy, the children shuttled between her cramped apartment and supervised visits. Their confusion over Aunt Kaitlyn's house was a heartbreaking footnote in the custody logs I glimpsed through public records. I did feel badly for the children. They didn't ask for any of this. But consequences rarely discriminate. I didn't stop at eviction because why do things by halves? Armed with a spreadsheet's ironclad trail. Bless you, Excel. I sued Diane and Gregory for $40,000 in unjust enrichment. Every cent I'd sunk into the ranch under false pretenses, itemized and documented with obsessive precision. Small claims court in Fresno sided with me in February, awarding $28,000 after reviewing the receipts and deed. Clear case of implied contract breach, the mediator ruled. His gavel echoing Beatrice's lessons on roots that demanded justice. Justice. What a concept. Word spread like wildfire on Reddit's r/Fresno thread. Valley inheritance scandal. Sister steals family ranch for tech flip. I posted it anonymously because I'm not completely vindictive. Just mostly. The upvoted post exploded with locals sharing similar betrayals. A whole community of people screwed over by their families. Rather depressing, actually. The Fresno Bee picked it up a week later. Almond Grove betrayal fuels Silicon Valley land grab fears. Front page feature quoting a local designer reclaiming her legacy. Reporters rang, but I declined interviews. Let the article bury Cassidy's reputation deeper than she'd tried to bury Beatrice's wishes. With the ranch mine outright, properly, legally, irrevocably mine, I launched Valley Roots Designs that spring. Heritage tours of the almond grove blended with interior workshops for historic homes. Turns out, people actually value preservation when it's not their family trying to sell it out from under them. Clients from Sacramento co-ops flooded in my first year, netting $70,000. Enough to install solar irrigation and hire a part-time hand for the harvest. The trees thrived. Thrive. Funny how things grow when they're not being systematically undermined. I started dating a landscape architect from Modesto. Our weekends were free of guilt trips and late-night bailouts. Revolutionary concept, that. Relationships without dysfunction. Who knew? Cassidy's last unblocked message arrived a month ago, begging for a loan to cover Riley's therapy bills. I deleted it unread. Not out of cruelty. Well, not entirely, but because boundaries aren't revenge. They're survival. In the valley where water wars and tech booms uproot everything, I'd learned to guard my roots. No second chances for those who tried to sell them out from under me. No apologies for refusing to set myself on fire to keep others warm. Beatrice's almond trees stand tall, their branches heavy with nuts each season, roots deep in soil tended with care rather than exploitation. People always ask me. Well, they ask in YouTube comments, which is the modern equivalent of asking, whether I regret it. Whether the nuclear option was truly necessary. Whether I could have just talked it out. Had a nice family chat over tea and biscuits. To which I say, have you met families? The thing about being the reliable one, the doormat, the emotional support human, it's not a role you audition for. It's thrust upon you, usually in childhood, and then reinforced through years of subtle manipulation disguised as love. Kaitlyn will handle it. Kaitlyn doesn't mind. Kaitlyn's just so dependable. Dependable. That word should come with a hazard warning. I spent years thinking that if I just tried harder, gave more, sacrificed more of myself on the altar of family harmony, they'd eventually see me. Really see me. Not as the helper or the backup plan or the emergency fund with legs, but as a person. Their daughter. Their sister. Spoiler alert, they never did. And that's the thing about conditional love. It's only conditional for some of you. Cassidy could fail upward her entire life, burning through money and marriages like tissues, and she'd still be the golden child. I could cure cancer whilst composing symphonies, and I'd still be expected to wire money for her next doomed venture. Some families operate like corporations, you see. There are shareholders, mom and dad, and there's the star employee they're investing in, Cassidy, and then there's the unpaid intern doing all the actual work. That was me. The intern. Except interns eventually leave. I used to lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling of that ranch house, listening to the almond trees rustle outside my window, and wonder what was wrong with me. Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't my accomplishments matter? Why did every family gathering feel like walking into a room where everyone knew a joke I wasn't in on? Therapy would have been cheaper than what I paid in repairs and loans, honestly. But hindsight's 20/20, as they say. And foresight's legally blind. The slap, though. Let's talk about that slap. It wasn't the hardest I'd been hit. Metaphorically, I'd taken worse blows for years. But there's something about physical violence that clarifies things rather wonderfully. It's like the universe finally speaking in a language impossible to misinterpret. When Cassidy's hand connected with my face, it wasn't just the sting of palm on cheek. It was years of dismissal, condescension, and exploitation crystallized into a single moment. And mom and dad's applause. Their laughter. That was the final nail in the coffin of any remaining familial obligation I might have felt. You can forgive a lot of things. Years of neglect, favoritism, financial exploitation. But applauding your physical assault. That's rather hard to come back from, emotionally speaking. I remember the exact thought that went through my head as my cheek burned. Oh, so this is who we really are. Not who I'd hoped we were. Not who I'd pretended we were. Who we actually were. A family held together not by love but by my willingness to be used. And the moment I stopped being useful, the moment I dared to set a boundary, violence and eviction. How very Dickensian. The file hitting the table. That sound will stay with me forever. It was the sound of the truth landing. Of masks falling. Of comfortable delusions shattering like dropped china. Their faces. Oh, their faces. The progression from smug superiority to confusion to dawning horror was better than any film I've ever watched. 'Cause it was real. The consequences were real. And for once in my life, I wasn't the one scrambling to clean up someone else's mess. Here's the thing that keeps people up at night, scrolling through Reddit threads about family drama. The question of whether you're the arsehole. The internet loves to judge. Everyone sucks here. Whyda, you're the arsehole. NTA, not the arsehole. As if complex human relationships and decades of dysfunction can be reduced to neat acronyms and upvotes. Am I the villain of this story? Depends on who's telling it, doesn't it? In Cassidy's version, I'm the jealous younger sister who couldn't handle her success, who weaponized a technicality to destroy the family out of spite. I'm sure she's got a whole narrative about how I manipulated dear, sweet Beatrice in her final days. Probably threw in some accusations about undue influence. Very dramatic. Very her. In Mom and Dad's version, I'm the ungrateful daughter who threw them out of their home, conveniently forgetting it was never their home to begin with. They probably tell their friends at the nursing home about their cruel child who chose property over family. They leave out the bit about the lies and the fraud and the decades of exploitation. Funny how that works. But here's what I know. Boundaries aren't cruelty. Consequences aren't revenge. And refusing to set yourself on fire to keep others warm isn't selfishness. It's survival. I didn't destroy this family. I simply stopped holding it together through sheer force of will and an ever-depleting bank account. What fell apart was already broken. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Could I have handled it differently? Perhaps. Could I have had a calm conversation, presented the deed, and negotiated some sort of arrangement? Maybe. But would they have respected that? Would they have suddenly seen the error of their ways, apologized profusely, and committed to treating me as an equal rather than an ATM? If you believe that, I've got some lovely oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you. Logan and Riley, though. They haunt me a bit if I'm honest. Children don't ask to be born into dysfunctional families. They don't choose their parents' poor decisions or their aunt's nuclear revenge plots. They're little witnesses to adult catastrophes they can't possibly understand. Riley clutching that tablet, eyes wide with confusion. Logan crying, asking why I was fighting. Those moments dig at me in ways the rest doesn't. I tell myself they're better off knowing the truth young. Better to learn early that family isn't sacred just because of shared DNA. Better to understand that adults make terrible decisions and sometimes those decisions have consequences that ripple outward like stones in water. But mostly I just hope they're okay. That Cassidy, for all her faults, is at least managing to be a decent mother. That the therapy I saw mentioned in those court documents is actually helping. That they don't grow up to be either doormats or exploiters, trapped in the same cycle that defined their mother's generation. I set aside money in a trust for their education, actually. Anonymous, of course. Through a solicitor, attorney, they'll never trace back to me. Because whatever sins their parents committed, those children deserve a chance at something better. It's not much. But it's what I can do whilst maintaining the boundaries necessary for my own survival. Turns out, evicting your entire family and becoming the subject of local news coverage is rather good for business. Who knew? Valley Roots designs took off in ways I never anticipated. Apparently, that woman who stood up to her family resonates with people. I've had clients specifically seek me out because they heard the story, related to it on some visceral level, and wanted to support someone who'd actually fought back. The tours of the almond grove have become surprisingly popular. People come from Sacramento, San Francisco, even Los Angeles, wanting to see the ranch that sparked a valley inheritance war. I talk about Beatrice, about preserving agricultural heritage in the face of tech expansion, about the importance of water conservation and sustainable farming. I don't mention the family drama unless asked directly. And when asked, I keep it brief. There was a misunderstanding about ownership that got sorted legally. Very British. Very proper. Deeply unsatisfying for the gossip-hungry. But professional. The restoration work has been even more fulfilling than I imagined. There's something profoundly therapeutic about taking broken, neglected structures and making them beautiful again. About honoring what came before whilst adapting for modern needs. Rather metaphorical, actually. Each barn I restore, each historic home I redesign, it feels like I'm doing for buildings what I did for myself. Taking something damaged, something people were ready to tear down or abandon, and proving it still has value. Still has purpose. Plus, the money's good. Really good. Turns out, When you're not constantly bailing out family members or paying for property you don't own, you can actually build wealth. Revolutionary concept. Marcus, the landscape architect from Modesto, was the first man I dated who didn't set off alarm bells in my nervous system. No red flags waving frantically in the breeze. No gut feeling of impending doom. Just pleasant compatibility. It was unsettling, honestly. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For him to reveal that he needed a loan, or that his ex-wife was secretly living in his garage, or that he'd been running a Ponzi scheme out of his garden shed. But no. It is just nice, competent, emotionally available. Has his own money and his own life and doesn't expect me to fix him or fund him or mother him. The bar's so low it's practically underground, but there we are. Our first proper row, argument not boat trip, was revelatory. We disagreed about irrigation systems for the almond grove. A legitimate professional disagreement about drip lines versus micro sprinklers. And we talked it out, like adults, presented evidence, listened to each other, reached a compromise. I actually cried afterward, which confused him terribly. Did I say something wrong? No, I explained. I've just never had a disagreement that didn't end with me either writing a check or being blamed for someone else's failures. He looked at me like I'd grown an extra head. That's not normal, Kaitlyn. I'm aware of that now, yes. Learning what healthy relationships look like in your 30s is a bit like learning a foreign language late in life. You can become proficient, but you'll always have an accent. Little tells that reveal you didn't grow up speaking it natively. I still apologize too much. Still brace for rejection when I express needs. Still have moments where I offer to pay for things that should be split. That old doormat programming kicking in automatically. But I'm learning. Slowly. With help. Because therapy's expensive but apparently necessary when your family's treated you like an ATM for a decade. Cassidy still tries to reach out occasionally. New phone numbers. Email addresses. Once, horrifyingly, she showed up at a client's property where I was working. That required a restraining order and a rather uncomfortable conversation with local police. Is this really necessary? The officer asked, clearly hoping this was some minor family spat he could talk us out of. I showed him the documentation. The fraud case. The assault at Thanksgiving. The bankruptcy. The pattern of harassment. His expression shifted from annoyed mediator to, oh, this is actually serious. Funny how evidence does that. Mum sends cards on my birthday. Hallmark specials with pre-printed sentiments about daughters being precious gifts. She never writes anything personal. Just signs her name, Mum, as if that single word carries weight. As if biology trumps behavior. I don't respond. They sit in a drawer with all the other documentation. Not out of sentimentality, but because my solicitor advised keeping everything. Just in case, she said ominously. Dad's silent. Completely. Not a word since the eviction. I suspect his pride's too wounded to reach out. Or perhaps he genuinely believes I'm the villain here. Either way, the silence is rather peaceful. Tyler's doing time, actually. 18 months for the fraud charges. Federal prison, which sounds more impressive than it apparently is. Cassidy's divorce attorney made sure everyone knew she had nothing to do with his schemes, painted herself as another victim. Perhaps she was. Perhaps she genuinely didn't know about the offshore accounts and the tax evasion and the dozen other schemes Tyler was running. But willful ignorance is still a choice, isn't it? The local community's been interesting. Small-town California has opinions about everything, and a family implosion provides months of entertainment. I'm simultaneously the hero who stood up to exploitation and the villain who destroyed a family. Can't please everyone. Not that I'm trying anymore. If I could go back and tell 25-year-old Kaitlyn anything, it would be this. Document everything. Not in a paranoid way. Though a little paranoia wouldn't hurt, but in a protect-yourself way. That spreadsheet saved me. Those recordings saved me. The paper trail I meticulously maintained for years was the difference between he said, she said, and ironclad legal victory. Also, boundaries aren't mean. This was the hardest lesson. I'd been trained my entire life to believe that saying no to family was cruel, selfish, unforgivable. But no is a complete sentence. I can't afford that. Doesn't require justification. That doesn't work for me. Doesn't need explanation. Family isn't sacred just because of shared DNA. Real family, the kind worth having, doesn't exploit you. Doesn't gaslight you. Doesn't applaud when you're assaulted. Real family celebrates your successes instead of treating them as hobbies. Respects your boundaries instead of punishing you for having them. Shows up for you without expecting a wire transfer in return. I've built that family now. Chosen family, they call it. Brooke, who helped me through the legal nightmare. Marcus, who shows me what healthy partnership looks like. Clients who've become friends. The part-time ranch hand, Miguel, who tends the almond trees and doesn't expect me to fund his life. These people see me, not as a resource or a safety net or a supporting character in someone else's story, but as a whole person with value beyond utility. It's taken years to internalize that, to believe it. Some days I still struggle. The ranch thrives. That's the beautiful irony, isn't it? All those years Mom and Dad let it deteriorate, complaining about the upkeep whilst pocketing my repair money. All Cassidy's schemes to sell it to developers for tech campuses. And now it's a showcase for sustainable Central Valley agriculture. Featured in design magazines. Host to workshops on water conservation and heritage preservation. Making more money than it ever has. Putting that income back into the land rather than into someone's boutique or bridge loans. Beatrice would be proud, I think. Oh. She saw something in me that my own parents missed. Recognized that I understood legacy in ways Cassidy never would. Legacy isn't about money. It's about stewardship. About understanding that you're part of a continuum. Holding something precious for the next generation rather than stripping it for parts. I'm considering writing a book, actually. Not this story, though it would make for spectacular reading, but about restoration. Historic home design. Preserving agricultural heritage in the face of Silicon Valley expansion. Marcus thinks I should. You've got knowledge worth sharing, he says. And a perspective people need to hear. Maybe. Or maybe I've had enough attention for one lifetime. Local newspapers are one thing. National media is quite another. For now I'm content with the work. The clients. The almond trees that bloom every spring with Beatrice's legacy in their branches. The life I've built on foundations of boundaries rather than exploitation. I regret it. The nuclear option. The public spectacle. The complete destruction of familial relationships. The honest answer is, sometimes. Not often. Not usually. But sometimes, late at night when the ranch is quiet and the almond trees rustle in the valley wind, I wonder what life would look like if I'd chosen differently. If I'd presented the deed calmly. Offered them a fair arrangement. Tried to rebuild rather than destroy. Would it have worked? Almost certainly not. Patterns that deep don't change from one conversation. People who've spent decades seeing you as a resource don't suddenly recognize your humanity because you ask nicely. But I wonder. Then I remember the slap. The applause. The years of being invisible except when needed. And I stop wondering. Chose survival. Self-respect. A future where I matter in my own life, rather than existing as a supporting character in someone else's drama. That's not revenge. That's self-preservation. And if self-preservation looks like revenge to people who profited from your exploitation, well, that tells you everything you need to know about their perspective, doesn't it? The story doesn't end with courtroom victories or eviction notices or even successful businesses built on boundaries. Those are just chapters. The real story, the one that matters, is about learning your worth when everyone around you insists you have none. About finding the courage to stop lighting yourself on fire to keep others warm. About discovering that family is something you build, not something you're sentenced to by accident of birth. I'm 34 now. The ranch is mine. The business thrives. The relationships in my life are healthy, reciprocal, built on mutual respect rather than unspoken debt. Beatrice's almond trees stand tall, their roots deep in soil I protect rather than exploit. just as she intended, just as she trusted I would. And every morning when I walk through the grove, checking irrigation lines and watching the valley sun paint the branches gold, I think, this is worth it. All of it. The pain, the confrontation, the fallout. Because I'm finally free. Not from family, though that's part of it. But from the expectation that I owe pieces of myself to people who never valued them. From the belief that no is cruelty. From the weight of carrying others whilst they complained I wasn't moving fast enough. That's the story. Not revenge. Not even justice, really. Just freedom. And freedom, it turns out, is worth fighting for. Even when, especially when, the battle is against the people who should have been fighting for you all along. So here's to boundary setting. To documentation. To saying enough even when it costs everything. Here's to chosen family over biological obligation. To trees that outlast betrayal. To legacies preserved by those who understand their worth. And here's to all of you reading this, scrolling through at whatever time it is in your corner of the world. Thanks for subscribing and sharing your time zones in the comments, by the way. Wondering if you're the arsehole for wanting to set boundaries with your own families. You're not. I promise you're not. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be destroyed by people who claim to love you. Sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's just survival. And survival, darlings, is always worth it. Finn.